Thank you.
All right, I think we're recording now.
You are.
Thanks for the reminder.
Welcome.
All right. On January 26th, we had a work session with our planning commission and city council to talk about trees and landscaping. And I forgot to change the title slide here in signs. Today, we're going to talk specifically about trees and landscaping, primarily about trees. During that meeting, there was some discussion of making sure that we get out to the public and to specific stakeholders, such as the Tree Commission, Alliance for Cape Fear Trees, Base Home Builder Association. So that's consider this as the first step of part of that. We can go from after this meeting, decide how we want to move forward with further input sessions. Purpose of this meeting today is kind of go over what we presented to City Council somewhat. I want to have just conversation amongst the groups. So I want the development community to hear from the tree preservation groups and the tree preservation groups to hear from the development community and so forth. My guess is there's a lot of common ground. And at the end of the day, we need to get a code through the process. And so we're looking for some consensus where we can find it. And at some point, we may just have to make decisions as a staff level based on the input we receive. And move forward that way. So this is not the end all be all public comment period, but just kind of look at the first step, if that makes sense. All right, tree standards, preservation and mitigation. Some of you, if you watched the council and planning commission work session, you may have seen this. Our broad goal of this, with the purpose of this code, is to try to balance our growth and development with tree preservation. We're hearing it. I'm sure the development community hears. I know the tree groups hear it. The importance of trees in our community. There's a lot of feedback, and if you read anything social media wise, comments at the newspapers, other media sources about the importance of trees in our community. And we understand that. We know the development community understands that. We know the tree groups understand that. Ultimately, our broad goal, though, is to try to balance that some way, shape, or form. And that's what we're trying to accomplish here through our code as we move forward. A couple of things that we are doing. We have certain situations which our current code provides exemptions, and we are going to modify them somewhat. Current code, if you're single family zoned and you're on lot that's less than 2 acres in size and you're permitted with a home, then you are exempt from our tree preservation standards. We are proposing to add multiple family districts to that. And one of the reasons you may ask is why are we considering doing that? But 2 images there, one of Eastwood Village and one of Winchime. Can anyone tell me which one of those 2 are zoned multifamily? One of those 2 is zoned multifamily. One of them is zoned residential. They look the same in this case. So we're proposing to extend that to properties that are zoned multifamily, but developed for or have a permit for a single family home. We do have those situations. So just kind of an even playing field, if you will. We also want to make sure that it's clear in our code that if you have trees located in a conservation resource, you're not exempt from the tree standards. That is one concern that we have, one issue with our current code. It's not real clear that that's the case. It gets bounced back and forth. So we're proposing to put some clear language in our code that if you have even if you're zoned single family on a lot with less than 2 acres in size, but you have a conservation resource on your property, you still have to comply with the tree preservation standards. We want to make that clear. We have some, we understand our code as far as preserving trees. We use a terminology called essential site improvements. So if someone's developing properties, they can remove trees for essential site improvements. Staff knows that essential site improvements, you need to put a building on your site somewhere. We know that there's associated parking with that. We know there's infrastructure needs. Somehow you have to handle stormwater. You have to put water and sewer into your site, electricity, power, et cetera. There's also some things, maybe another local government, the state or the federal permitting process may require. So that's kind of how we understand what essential site improvements are. What we're trying to figure out or trying to understand is where do leveling a site or massive regrading or just wholesale clear cutting, where does it come into play? So we really want to understand that as we potentially redefine or refine our definition for essential site improvements. So any feedback, and it doesn't have to be at this very moment, but feedback from anyone who's interested, help us work that out. We're all ears. We want to hear that. The way the rough draft is written right now is that we want to minimize wholesale clear cutting, massive regrading and leveling of a site, and hopeful with the hopeful result that people will take advantage of the existing topography and those kind of things on their property and not have to do a lot of massive regrading. Just a couple of pictures here. Image on the left is Walmart in Hilton Head, South Carolina. Image on the right is our Walmart on Sigmund Road. I pulled those off of Google Maps today. So I'm not suggesting we have to be the image on the left. I'm hoping we can do better than the image on the right. Maybe we're somewhere in between. I don't know if any of you have been to that Walmart there in Hilton Head, but it's you can't see it from the road. So it is possible to develop within, and take tree preservation areas into mind as you're doing that. I was aware that Hilton Head, South Carolina, maybe they have different, maybe we're not as familiar as or similar as I think we are as far as grade and everything, but I think it is possible. Maybe, perhaps we don't end up here, but is there somewhere in the middle that we're trying to end up? Again, trying to balance that growth, the growth and development that is going to occur in our community with tree preservation. Retaining protected trees. We certainly want, if you're going to remove trees from a site, we want permits to be required. Tree protection fencing, we do allow for some site adjustments to retain trees. That could be based on topographic reasons, parking requirements, or in landscaping size. And we can also flex the landscaping size of an island or street yard or anything like that. So that's current practice, and we do continue to, our plan is to continue that practice in the new code. This is a slide or an image of our current standards for various types of protected trees. Regulated trees, if you're a 4-inch flowering tree, dogwood, tree like that, American or American holly, you are regulated. If you're 8-inch hardwood, you're regulated, and a 12-inch conifer, you're currently regulated tree. The significant tree runs from 8 inches for those American hollies, dogwoods, other flowering trees, 24 inches for hardwoods, and hardwoods and some types of pines like the longleaf pine, and 32 inches for other types of pines. We also consider any buffer, trees within a buffer is considered protected, as well as any trees, any regulated or significant trees in a street yard are currently identified as protected. You can focus on the box, the red box. That's where we're looking at potential changes. Significant trees, we are proposing to, if you can look on recall the first slide, it's 8-inch for those flowering trees, 24-inch for the hardwoods, and 32 inches for certain pine trees. Our proposal at the moment is retain that 8 inches for those flowering trees, American hollies, and so forth for significant trees. We're also entertaining and reducing the significant tree category for hardwoods and pines, conifers, to 20 inches, or do we want to maintain it at 24 inches? And then introducing a specimen tree at 24 inches or 36 inches, which is what New Hanover County does. You may see the little asterisk here in the footnote down here. In reviewing what New Hanover County has recently adopted, the significant trees are at 18 inches for hardwoods, for longleaf pine, bald cypress and pond cypress, and then all other conifers are at 24 inches. So if we go 20 inches, we're getting closer to what they actually have established as their significant tree threshold. So we are proposing to introduce the specimen tree provision that New Hanover County has adopted, I believe, in 2019 initially, and then revamped in their adoption of the landscaping or their tree preservation standards last year. They do have live oaks, both bald cypress and pond cypress, and longleaf pines as a specimen tree when it's at 36 inches, is my understanding. The city at the moment, in a rough draft, we are proposing that at 24 inches. And similar to New Hanover County, if that tree is to be removed, it will require variance from our Board of Adjustment. Yes, sir, Jim. You have a question? I think I saw you wave your hand.
Yeah, I got just a comment, and that is the difference in protected size between hardwood and pines. And the criteria, minimum criteria for pine has always been larger than hardwoods. But from the standpoint of the hydrologic functions, pines are better than hardwoods because they're transpiring water year round. and typically the transpiration storage and transpiration loss of pines is greater than hardwoods. So for that and for other reasons, I recommend that there be no differentiation between hardwoods and pines in terms of the minimum size in each of these categories.
All right, so what I'm hearing from you is that, so where we have currently 24 inches regulated for hardwoods, and then some types of pines, longleaf pine being a significant tree at 24 inches, and then there's a list of other pines that are at 32 inches. You believe they should all be the same, is what I'm hearing from your perspective.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. So in our proposal at the moment, whether we land at 20 inches or 24 inches, or even similar to 18 inches what the county has, we have grouped them all together. You notice the difference between the two?
Good.
Just for slide purposes, I couldn't list all the trees in every single instance, just for the sake of how much area we had on the slide. So, but we are still open for discussion on anything like that. So again, we are introducing the specimen tree category for New Hanover County. Where we land is still up for debate. We've acknowledged, and we did during the presentation to the Planning Commission and City Council, that New Hanover County is at 36 inch. If we were to reduce our significant trees from 24 inches, then our thought was to put our specimen tree at 24 inch. Yep. Just trying to be fully transparent as we move forward. All right, some other things that we are considering in our code, and I do not believe New Hanover County's done this. Was there a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is Cameron. So what,
Hey,
going back to your slide right there, what is the rationales from New Hanover County's 36? And there was a lot of trials and tribulations and discussions, and particularly there was with our association and the Tree Alliance, and I believe Connie's on this, significant conversations around that. And obviously we came together with a letter of support in that. Why 24? What's significant in the city versus the county?
Well, I'm going to let some of my tree experts try to answer that question after I probably don't do a good job with it. Just put it up, because I'm not an expert on trees, as many of you know. Well, one thing we do feel like our the tree stock in the city is we're more urban. We have different characteristics in the city than we do in the county, more suburban areas. We were also, if you're just going back to this threshold here, Cameron and whoever and others, if we were to reduce our significant tree category from 24 to 20 from 24 inch to 20 inch, then we were considering trying to pick up that specimen tree category 24 inch. Aaron Reese, if you don't mind jumping in and try to do a better job of answering that question than I have.
Yeah, and I think you got a good start on it there, Ron. And I think David typed in a question a few minutes ago about why not stay consistent with the county for the regulations. And we got similar questions from City Council and the Planning Commission as well when we presented this to them. And about the easiest way to explain it is because of the difference in the amount of, or the tree count within the city limits, where we are becoming much more urban as opposed to the county. The number of significant or large trees within the city is less than what is in the county. And for the different styles of development, we're trying to preserve more of what we have, because when we have redevelopment, we get more and more that's taken off. So we're trying to preserve the big ones that we do have, because there is definitely a finite number of them. And we're seeing, as redevelopment happens, we're seeing more and more of those trees that are almost significant under current code. They're very impressive trees, but they're not necessarily significant under current code. Those are getting taken out fairly frequently. So we're trying to kind of head that off. So if that doesn't answer your question, let me know and I'll see if I can explain further.
I think it does in a 10,000 altitude view, but it somewhat maybe doesn't answer the question on the code. I mean, is it because of site constraints? Is it because of site design? Is it because the code dictates? I mean, I go back up to here to the car wash incident that basically created all the concerns in New Hanover County and got us to this point. That wasn't a characteristic of the developer coming in and just saying, I want to remove 5 large live oaks. It was a characteristic of the development code moving the building on top of those live oaks. And after 5 Board of Adjustment cases or variances, the building got moved back to the side. So I understand, Aaron, but I also go back to the code itself, because the code can dictate where buildings can and can't go. And I don't know if, and so probably another larger question to the question.
But let me answer that a little bit too. If you know what the county, I know you're familiar with what the county did to fix that issue. And what they did was very similar to what we have in our code currently. We have the flexibility in our current code, and we plan to bring them forward, move them forward, or retain them to require that building to be moved to and actually flex a setback to save a tree. So we have that flexibility. The county actually pretty much used our same language during that development of the specimen tree ordinance for some of the flexibility given to the planning staff. So that's what I recall reading in their ordinance.
Yeah, Ron, this is Connie. May I say? Yeah. Of course, Cameron is right. You know, we did come to, when we met over the site to save the trees where the Islander restaurant and the car wash was going in. It was done very rapidly and very quickly. And it was a compromise, you know, from our standpoint, to go with the 36 inches in order to make that acceptable and to get that fix in. But I specifically wrote and when in that portion of it and let everybody know that that was really a fix for that one particular place, and until we were able to do something better within the county. So I am, and I've said that to Rebecca Roth and, you know, predecessors. And so that we, as an Alliance for Cape Fear Trees, are not satisfied with their 36 inches. We would like for it to be smaller, but in order to move ahead and save those trees and get things done, we were willing to go that route for the time being. And she knows we're going to come back about that one. So to make it smaller. Mm-hmm.
So is there some common ground? And I understand, Connie, what you just said, and Cameron, I understand what your position is, believing that there was some compromise back then for the 36 inch. Is there room either way? Is it 30 inch, 32 inch? Is it 36 inch? Is it 24 inch? You know, so that's some things we're willing to entertain. Again, I don't know if you were on, Cameron, when I first opened up, but I see this as the first of several of these type of meetings. to come to consensus on some items before we move forward with the landscape.
Yeah, I heard you, Ron. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I got on just a little bit late, but I heard your introduction. So,
Yeah, I was still trying to figure out who I was on the line when I first opened up. So I don't know.
and I would agree with Connie. I mean, we had some very good conversations, and I appreciate both organizations coming together to work on the issue. Because I think through those last 2 years of conversations, we have learned a lot about each other, what we're trying to accomplish. So,
Right.
but it goes back to Ron, your question of comment of trying to strike a balance. And I mean, 24, 25, 27, 36, 32, it's up for discussion, I think is what you're saying.
Yes, and I think council's going to expect us to have these conversations. So that's why we're reaching out to do that. But I'm trying to be fully transparent. So for everyone, this is what we presented to City Council and Planning Commission during the work session. I don't know if you've had, Connie, I think Megan told me you had watched it, and maybe Jim, you had.
I was there. Yeah.
And I know Tyler was there as well. So some of this is redundant from what you've heard before, but we're trying to start as our base there, and then try to figure out what we can. Where is the consensus, and then how can we move forward? So is there another question, chat? All right, we'll save that one, Dave. All right, so I'm going to move on, if that's okay with everyone.
There's
Yes.
something in the chat, but there's something in the chat from Dave. I don't know whether you saw it or not.
I did, and he says save for later discussion. So I said we'll
Okay.
move on. I didn't actually read the full question. Okay, one of the things that we're proposing to put in our code is regarding invasive trees. Currently, we treat an invasive tree as any other tree. So if it meets a significant tree threshold, then it is going to be mitigated just like any other tree would be, protected. So we are proposing that if you have an invasive tree, that we don't count it as a protected tree, we also would not allow it to be used for any compliance for landscaping provisions. I mean, you can't plant it later to outside of the minimum standards, but not allow it to count towards our landscaping or tree requirements. And then if mitigation would not be required if that tree is removed. I fully understand, the staff fully understand that every single tree benefits our environment. They're habitat for wildlife. They control erosion. They convert carbon dioxide over the oxygen. They work with the water cycles. Totally understand that. But when it comes down to trying to get a development approved, and there's a live oak tree or a mimosa tree, just as an example, we want that priority to be real clear. And that's from our perspective. Let's figure out how we can save that mimosa tree. Maybe that costs us, save the live oak. Maybe it costs us the mimosa. That's kind of the thought process behind that. So just using the North Carolina Invasive Plant Council, there's 6 types of invasive trees in North Carolina and in the eastern region. Maybe there's others, but this is the 6 that the North Carolina Invasive Plant Council has identified. Bradford pear, the mimosa, the tree of heaven, princess tree, the China berry tree, and the Chinese tallow tree. So again, our proposal would be if it's an invasive tree that we don't consider it as a protected tree. And you would not have to mitigate it, but also in exchange, we wouldn't want you to plant that Bradford pear in your development and try to satisfy that requirement. So any questions on that?
Ron, this is Jim. I would go even farther and require that trees on the North Carolina exotic invasive list be required to be removed, because each one of these are tremendous seed producers, and they're on that invasive tree list for a reason.
Okay. And Megan, did you get that?
So Ron, my understanding, they're basically, if I've got those 3 that are on the Bradford pear, mimosa, and the tree of heaven, which I don't think I've ever seen the tree of heaven. If I've got 1 or all 3 of those on my development site, it's just there. Can't be counted against me, but also can't be used to help me with any kind of incentives or any kind of mitigation factor, correct? It's just there, and it exists to be there, and it is what it is.
Correct. That's how we've written, that's what our rough draft would say now. If we incorporate what Jim has just suggested, though, it would say that you would have to remove that tree.
All right, well, if I have to remove it, then I want an incentive on the other side to remove it because it is a canopy and is a tree.
We can look at that either way. But our thought process was like, we don't, again, going back to the previous slide, we're not going to count it against you. So it's not a protected tree. If it meets that threshold, you're not going to have to mitigate it if it's removed, but also not, somebody has a chat, and also not, can be used to meet or satisfy the landscaping requirements.
Yeah, I'm a little hesitant on where that's heading. I mean, I go back to the conservation, the homeowner, when you first started, I know of one instance that popped up here within the last year where the builder went in to build a single family house on an area that the homeowner bought the lot and was in a conservation area. No one even knew. So it's kind of in the same respect in the conservation areas too.
Yeah, and Allison just made that point. If you're required to be removed, consider that we cannot remove trees in all places, using conservation area as an example.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how y'all as a city educate the homeowners on that. I see that as a catch-22 a lot of times after the fact.
We're working on that somewhat. We actually, if we haven't already, hopefully by the end of the week, we're getting out some information to homeowner associations as well as our tree removal folks here in town on what our requirements are.
Personally, from the HBA, I'd rather see if the tree's there and it's not in the calculation and I can't use it for it to help me and it's not going to be used against me, let it stay. That's just the HBA's.
Yep, and we'll go weigh all this information.
All right.
So appreciate the feedback from both of you. Jim, did you have another question? I thought I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, Allison's comment about a conservation area, that's where they should be removed. I know the current code says
Some of the invasive trees.
removed from a conservation area, but you really don't want invasive exotics in a conservation area to start with.
You're talking about invasive trees only though, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, like I said, we're gathering information and we'll come up with something.
Hey, Ron, there's Aaron. If I can jump in on something just a minute.
Yes.
I'm not definitely not fluent in all the rules and regulations of the conservation area, but some or all of those invasive species, you might already be allowed to remove those from conservation areas. I'm not positive. But I do agree with you, Jim. If anything should be removed from conservation area, it would be the invasives. And on a slightly, or continuing with the theme of the invasives, I know we have discussed with those 6 invasives particular, and any other one that happens to come up on that state or federal invasive list, would be to not allow them to be planted. Not just not allowing them to count for credit, but not allow them to be planted going forward.
Yeah, that's something we have discussed, but it's going to be difficult, I think, from enforcement to tell a homeowner they can put a Bradford pear in their yard. So that's something we'll continue talking about at a staff level.
Yeah, but just wanted to throw it out there. It has been discussed. So.
Yeah, we have discussed it. You're right.
Yeah.
As part of the Wilmington Tree Initiative, at some point, we're going to be developing a number of educational tools, and that will be one for residents and homeowners as to the issue of invasive exotics.
Okay, if I can move on to mitigation for tree loss. This is a slide of our current standards. I won't bore you with all the formulas and stuff to get there. I kind of just try to give you the answers instead of the formula. So 36-inch significant tree in the city, if it is removed, it is required to be planted with 24 replacement trees. What we do is you double that inches. So 36 times 2 is 72 inches. Divide that by 3, and it comes in the 24. So that's how the significant tree mitigation works currently with our city. We actually do require regulated trees to be mitigated in some instances. Again, the math, 12 divided by 3 in this case is 4. We do not require the doubling the inches. We also have a mitigation chart that currently provides a percentage of mitigation based on the tree type. So currently a mimosa tree would be mitigated with 25%. Longleaf pine or live oak, depends on the size, would be 100%. So there's a full range of different tree species listed in our code with that mitigation chart. Do you have a question, Dave? All right.
So real quick, I ran into this issue. Go back to that last slide.
Yep,
I had to
there you
remove a really large tree, and I think what I have a problem with, one, I didn't have room to put 24 replacement trees on the site. It was only a, I don't know, 8,000 square foot site. And what sent me over the edge was not the $17,000 bill to mitigate that tree, was the fact that you counted trees instead of me being able to go back with, 10 8-inch trees. I had to go, or you considered 24 4-inch trees to be just as valuable as 8-inch trees. So
You're stealing my thunder a little bit. Next slide.
oh geez, sorry dude. Okay, well you should start with the good stuff and then hit me with the bad stuff.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Let me get to the next slide, see if this answers your question. I will pick up on what you just said. Our current code requires a growing area of 144 square feet for each one of those replacement trees. So I'm not quick enough to do the math on what 24 times 144 is, but it could take up some property for sure. So what we're proposing is, again, this chart. So 36-inch live oak has to be replaced with 72 inches. So we're still doubling it, but it would replace with the inches instead of total. So instead of 24 trees, we're getting 72 inches replaced. You could do that in with 6, whatever, 12-inch trees or 12 6-inch trees, or was it however many 3-inch trees. With a minimum growing, but the minimum growing area is based on soil volume, considering tree size. And I don't know the specific, we have something drafted on the specifics of that, and any specific questions you have on that, Aaron Reese will need to answer that. But the more mature tree it is, the more soil volume you need, I believe.
I can go ahead and jump in while you're on that, Ron. I think if I remember correctly, I believe it's large maturing trees is 1,700 square feet, I think. And then the small maturing understory trees, I think it's 600 square feet, and the medium maturing trees, intermediate trees would be somewhere in the middle. I'd have to glance back. I'm drawing a blank right now. My mind's not working, but there is that volume.
200 cubic feet for small maturing trees, 700 cubic feet for medium maturing trees, and 1,700 cubic feet for large maturing trees.
Yep. There you go.
So in other words, Ron and Aaron, you're looking more at the actual root ball of the size of the tree that would be replaced instead of this arbitrary 144 square feet.
Yes, looking at actual volume, not just square footage, surface area.
Okay, so a 3-inch tree obviously has a root ball that's probably no bigger than the computer that I'm using here for practicals. And if you went up to, I don't know. I mean, I think most, 18-inch. So you're based. Okay, I got you. I understand.
Yeah. Now, don't misunderstand. Now, we're not talking about the volume of the root ball. We're talking about available space for the tree to grow into.
Yes. Okay. So are you using drip line in that too calculation? Does that calculate?
No.
Drip line? Okay.
No, we don't use drip line in any of our calculations at all.
Okay.
And then if you recall the mitigation chart we had there, we're saying native 100%, non-native 75%, and then the invasive not having to do any mitigation. So providing, Dave, did that answer your question? Okay. So providing credits for preserved trees, we want to clarify that the credits are for non-protected trees. So if you were required to protect the tree anyway, we want to clarify that you don't get credit for preserving the tree that you're required to protect. We want to simplify our criteria from a chart, just to have your total diameter breast height divided by 6, and that equals what your credit is. And we are going to allow credits to be used for offset mitigation requirements, as well as spading and transplanting. both on, as presented, as written now, both on the property for the development as well as on public property. So if Aaron has a park site that we could use some trees, and you have, and developer has some trees that can be moved, it's something we can consider accepting. Did I say that correctly, Aaron?
Yes, that's correct. It would not be a situation that we have to accept the trees,
Right.
but it would be a situation we would accept them if we were able.
Correct.
So it's a may, not a shall on our end.
All right, moving on to protecting the critical root zone. Our current standard is for every 1 inch of DBH, you have to have a critical root zone of 1 foot. So that 24-inch live oak, you have a 24-foot critical root zone. Our proposal would be 1 foot for every 1 inch DBH for those trees that are 4 inches to 8 inches in size. And then if that tree is larger than 8 inches, then it's 1 foot for every 3/4 inch DBH for some trees. So at that same 24-inch oak tree would then need a 32-foot critical root zone as what we've currently written.
Ron, how much have y'all looked at overall site plans on that, particularly in a commercial setting?
We've looked at a couple, but one I think noticeable change in the difference between our code and the current and the county code. And if I can, let me go through this slide here, Cameron, and then if I need to regroup and back and answer your question.
Oh, that's fine.
All right, so what our current code requires for this establishes the critical root zone here. And then our current code allows some encroachment into that critical root zone. Half the radius and no more than 40% can be disturbed. So it's kind of been interpreted 40% on one side. Well, trees, radius really doesn't have a side. I mean, a circle really doesn't have a side. So what we're proposing is to limit that to 20% of the critical root zone area. That's one thing the county doesn't allow, which as best I can tell. I think they're using drip line, not critical root zone. So they established the critical root zone or drip line, and you have to keep everything out of. You can't encroach into that area, correct? If I read their code correctly. We see
I have to
this.
go back and look at it, but I know the critical root zone, I don't believe is a term used in the county.
Yeah, I think they changed it. We see importance of allowing some type of encroachment though, because we think that it'll still help preserve trees. Otherwise, Cameron, you're going to come and tell me, well, we have to put our building here, and if we can't disturb a little bit of the encroach a little bit in that critical root zone, I got to remove the tree. You've created the same situation where now I'm being forced to remove a tree that I didn't want to remove. That's why we feel like it's important to allow some type of encroachment, and we're just trying to simplify this, but we're allowing 20% of the entire critical root zone to be, at least as written, to be disturbed or encroached. Here's an image of a tree that was somewhat trying to show what that critical root zone may look like on a development. And then here's that same tree with a building next to it. And I've asked the question when I put the slide together, can we do better? You see the tree identified right here on the site plan with a red arrow. I'm not so certain. If I looked at that tree survey correctly, that's a 48-inch oak tree. That would have required a 48-foot radius coming off the center line of that tree. My guess is they disturb, and it's hard to tell on that angle. Maybe they're 20 feet off that. Maybe it's less than 20 feet. I don't know. I didn't measure it. Maybe that unit doesn't go there, but they could have picked that unit up somewhere else. So I'm challenging us as a staff, us as a community. Can we do better than this with our ordinance? Because ultimately, I don't think this is what we were hoping to get out of that site. It may look fine here on this 2-dimensional site plan, but once the building got built, it looks, I don't know if that tree is going to survive or not. I really don't. I'm not the expert, Aaron.
Ron, let me play devil's advocate real quick, because it's very rare I see someone get rid of a unit for a tree or there's space to move the unit somewhere else. at that point, if we're not going to allow that, they're just going to ask for that tree to be mitigated. Because
Perhaps.
it happens a lot. I have 5 projects in my head right now where we have trees with at least 40% encroachment into the critical root zone. And if we told them they couldn't do that, they have nowhere else to put their building on the site. So they're going to ask for that tree to be removed instead of try to save it. It's kind of a catch-22.
Sure. We're, like I said, we're still looking into these kind of things. And to answer your question, Cameron, have we sat down with a lot of site plans, start applying the no? That's one of our next steps.
Yeah, I mean, you know, trying to catch that unit up somewhere, you may not be able to. It's just the site constraints don't allow for it. I mean, because there's other options, and I'm not telling you anything wrong. You don't want to know. I mean, you got stormwater, everything else, all the infrastructure. I mean, that tree's history.
On this particular plan, I believe they could have moved it because there's some 2-unit homes up here.
Okay, all right, and you know, I don't want to get into a situation where dictating the whole entire code on one plan either. So let's
Agree 100% with you.
So.
Agree 100%. This is just an example, though. This is not really what we intended when we meant encroachment, allowing the encroachments. So that's kind of concludes what we're proposing for the tree preservation piece. I think we've had some good conversation so far, both on the chat as well as the questions have been brought up. We're here to listen. We want to hear from both development representatives as well as the tree group representatives, and for each one of you to hear each other. So we're here to listen on that. I wasn't really going a lot onto the landscaping standards. We are looking to improve our streetscapes, street yard requirements. This actually is off. This is Wilmington. This is Military Cutoff Road at Eastwood Road. That development there, Progress Energy used to have. We are proposing on doing something with our tree canopies instead of just having the canopy requirements on the parking facilities. Potentially having them for impervious surface thresholds of a lot, not just for the parking facilities. So we're here for questions and comments and for discussion from here on. So I've scheduled 2 hours for this meeting. Didn't know if it would take that long or not.
There's some, just to interrupt real fast, Ron, there's
Sure.
some questions in the chat. We might want to hit those first and then.
All right. So I think we answered the first one. Dave, you're saying save for later. I've been to the Hilton Head Walmart. Even if existing trees aren't available, why can't we create the same outcome through design? That's a good question. What is happening that can't happen?
One thing, even before I really paid a lot of attention to trees, I've been going to the Lowe's on New Center Drive since the 90s, early 90s. And the trees at the Lowe's at New Center Drive have never grown, ever. They are the same size today as they were 30 years ago at this point. And it's always been like, I wonder why that is. And then we did a parking lot at 720 North 3rd. And some of the trees grew great. And some of the trees never got any bigger ever than basically what we planted. And I'm trying to figure out, is it because underneath it's compacted? Is it rock? So again, I don't want to sidetrack the discussion, but I mean, okay, even if the Walmart that is now 15 years old on Sigmund Drive or whatever, I think it is 15 years old on Sigmund Drive that you took the aerial of, even the satellite picture has to be from the last 3 to 5 years. There's no trees. And so even if we have these planting standards, how come we're not even filling in at all? So, and maybe it's an Aaron Reese question, but what are we doing wrong? Because I get it. We can't save every tree. We're going to do what we can. We're always going to get pushback. But if we're planting a ton of trees, at least the next generation will get to have a Walmart that looks like Hilton Head. But we're not even getting anywhere near there, even after 15 years. So that's why I don't understand why we're not able to do that, period, or at least set the motion in place now to get there.
And you're right. I'm not qualified to answer that question.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I'll certainly jump in on that, Dave. And you make a very good point, and there's some background to that Walmart on Sigmund Road. The soil volume requirement that we're trying to get in, that we would like to get in, will certainly help address the stunted non-growing trees that you see in these parking lots. Because like you say, the the soil that, or lack thereof, that is in those parking lot islands, is causing basically very limited to no root space, and you're basically bonsaiing those trees. It's the same effect as putting a tree in a tiny little pot and keeping it that size. So that's why you're seeing those trees like that have been there for 15, 20 years, and they're maybe 5 feet taller than the day they were planted. And for the Walmart on Sigmund Road, unfortunately, the reason you don't see much canopy in that area, there are a lot of trees in that parking lot, but for quite a few years, and somehow without us knowing it, or without anybody with the city noticing, the landscapers that took care of that property repeatedly topped and rounded over every tree in that parking lot and kept it about 15, 16 feet tall. When that came to our attention a few years ago, we absolutely put a stop to that. And those trees are trying to break out of that. Unfortunately, they will never be what they were intended to be because of the repeated topping. But they are in a lot better condition now than they were 5 years ago.
Let me follow up on that again, and I don't want to sidetrack to parking lots, but we've got plenty of parking lots in Wilmington, and those are great places to get people excited and familiar and aware of trees, more so than even an apartment complex or a multifamily or a single family home. But the one thing, and again, I'm just trying to get my head around this, the Walmart at Hilton Head, there are no curbs. Does that have anything to do with how the trees are growing?
Short answer, yes.
Yeah, let me jump in on this conversation. One of my pet peeves are small parking lot islands where trees don't grow. And it's due to a number of things, but the major issue is, as Dave mentioned, they're just been plopped into whatever was a result after extensive grading and soil movement. And as Aaron mentioned, it's just like keeping a tree in a pot. So it's not only the soil volume available for roots to expand, but the quality of the soil itself. And what Dave just referred to, that parking lots in Hilton Head, those are also being used as stormwater infiltration zones. And I would really like for you folks, those folks who are doing development projects, as well as the city, and how you allow for different types of tree plantings. I would prefer to see a few wide zones in which the soil is improved, and they're also used for stormwater infiltration, versus many more small islands. I presume the original idea for small islands was to provide shade on the parking lot. Well, it's not happening, and it just they just don't grow.
Yeah, I think they were for shade. I also think they were for more for traffic control too, making sure that cars are not being bumped into as people cut corners on,
Yeah.
when they're moving the parking lot. Okay, let's see. Did that answer the question somewhat? All right. I think we answered that one already. The first one that you asked, Allison, about if they had to be removed and considered we cannot remove trees in all places like conservation areas. Look at the camera rules. Danny had a question. Does species type count for more or less credit than others? Should it not?
Yeah, I'm self-professed, know a lot less about trees than a lot of people on this call, but I mean, I hear a lot of people talk about not all trees are created equal. And, sometimes the type of tree or the condition of a tree, might not, does that take into consideration, or is it taken into consideration, or is it purely just a number quantity kind of calculation?
With the tree credits, it was merely a quantity calculated with the calculation. I'm not trying to specify every single tree, and this tree gets a little bit more credit than that tree. We were trying to keep our code, we're trying to prepare newer code with fewer formulas and trying to keep it a little less complex. I don't know the answer to your question about from a credit perspective, should should more credit be given more, because I'm like you, I don't know a lot about trees. So I've learned a lot working on this project, but I don't know if one of the tree experts have any thought on that.
Ron, if I can jump in here, I have something to piggyback on what Danny just mentioned.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of the things that have been talked about on the call have been about the size of the tree and not really focusing on the quality of what you're saving. And I think that's what Danny was just hitting on.
Okay.
I think it's really important to look at maybe a group of small trees is better than saving the one half-dead 24-inch water oak on a site. Maybe there's a group of 6 4-inch live oaks that are just really going to be something one day and going to do more for our environment than that water oak ever would. So I think as we move through this conversation, let's talk about that. If there's a way that we could focus on some of the quality versus quantity.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because as far as I know, the developer or engineer can call Aaron out and determine if the tree's dead or not. But if the tree's not determined dead and it's just in really rough shape, it's counted the same as a very healthy tree. You know, and a lot of these trees have vines all over them. They haven't had good sunlight, you know, and once you can get sunlight to them, maybe they'll become a very nice tree again. But yeah, the quality of tree all counts the same at this point. So I think that's a good point that was brought up.
Yeah, this is Jim.
It's gonna be very subjective. That's the problem.
Yeah, well, let me wade in here. Certified arborists who are also certified in tree assessment, I would recommend be hired on any project site where you've got a lot of trees, because this issue is an important one. I've done some assessments on several sites in the last couple of years, and it gets down to a judgment call on whether a tree is of high value on that site or not. And you're looking at its general health, you're looking at damage to the bole, and it's often a judgment call. But the risk assessment approach is a standard of arboricultural practice, and there are several certified arborists in town who can do that. It would certainly be worthwhile for a tree that is deemed in poor health. It should not count against the developer for removing it, in my view.
Yeah, Jim, we do encourage that to have property owners hire a certified professional to take a look, because with my position with the city, I am limited in what I can do, not just from a workload standpoint, and it's more from a legal standpoint, what I can and can't do. Not that city staff is not professionally qualified to do it. It's just that we are not allowed to do certain things. So how far we can go in assessments is very limited, but we do encourage property owners to have professional assessments done, and we do take those into consideration. I have, right off the top of my head, I can think of a handful in the last few years where the owner having a professional look at the trees made a very, very large difference in the outcome as far as mitigation that they had to do. So we do encourage that. We do take it into consideration. Now we might, like Ron keeps saying, there's things that we can do better, and that may be one of them. Well, we might need to clarify some of that so that we can do better.
What we have found in trying to I'm going to use the word fix our current code is we have all these great ideas, trying to codify it, putting it in words sometimes is very difficult with all the what if situations and that kind of thing. So Allison, if you would like to help us with that, with your background, that would be great.
Yeah.
I'm recruiting you.
Okay. I think one of the things that we might consider, there's quite a cost that's associated with the arborists being brought in, and I think if there were, I don't know, a credit of some sort given to the developer that's willing to come in, really assess what he or she has on his or her site, and then really take ownership of it and try to promote the healthy stuff and weed out the not healthy stuff. I think that would be seen more favorably than just saying, hey, you have to have an arborist, sorry.
So excuse my ignorance on that. So is that not real? I mean, should that not happen anyway?
Well, I mean, there are a few things that we have built into the code right now. We've got a surveyor goes out on site, then somebody like myself, a landscape architect, usually goes out and takes a look at the site and, kind of makes an assessment for what can be saved and what can't be saved. But it's very rare that we actually get an arborist involved unless we've got trees that are really close to buildings or roots that need to be cut or those kind of situations.
Okay. All right. Are you willing to help us craft something if we want to the quality of tree and the
Yes, I am.
Credits? All right. Thank you for that. Looking at the comments, sorry, making sure I see. Allison, you had a question about critical root zone all the way around the tree. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think you may have answered that when you got to the next slide about the 20% CRZ. So I think that takes care of it. But there is a thing about, Aaron, I'd like if you could speak a little bit about the amount of a tree's roots that can or can't be cut and kind of when we can make the judgment call that a tree might survive. I think that could help the group understand what we're talking about here.
Yes, and I wish that was a completely cut and dry answer, but unfortunately, like all things with trees, there are very few cut and dry answers, especially trees dealing with construction impacts. Different species of trees tolerate construction differently. Live oak is tough as nails, can handle a lot of damage to the root system. Magnolia, not so much. You look at a magnolia tree wrong on a construction site and it's going to die before you leave. I think our goal is to provide for enough flexibility that we can make those calls based on species and health of the tree and style of or construction type, and how that different types of construction will impact the root zone. So I don't know if that answers your question. I may be chasing rabbits here a little bit, but I think we're trying to write in some flexibility so that we can answer the question that you're asking.
Can I just again to educate myself? This is Dave Spatrino. We had a project downtown, and there was a tree that was really, really close to the foundation. And we made the call that it was better to leave the tree and run the risk of that tree dying later on than it was to completely guarantee that the tree should be taken out and that tree doesn't stay. Is that irresponsible to do that? Or is that just making it more expensive later on? I mean, it's been 2 years, the tree's still there. Tree actually, and it's a live oak. A laurel oak. It seems to have done very well. But we were working with the city, and the decision was initially to remove the tree, and we opted to shift the house over. The city gave us some relief on setbacks the other direction, and that tree is still there. And again, I don't know that you can answer the question other than, should we try to save the tree even though it may not survive, or is that just careless?
I think that's what I was saying. If we're trying to, as I say, we may not be quite where we need to be, but we're trying to write in some flexibility or allow for some flexibility so that we can deal with that type of situation. So if, again, depending on species and depending on construction type, we might be able to allow, maybe we can allow more of a disturbance of the critical root zone. Maybe we don't allow as much. So Yeah, I don't know if I have a good answer for your question right now, but our goal is to preserve more and allow for more intrusion if possible to help preserve those trees.
And
And I realize that's not a real clear answer, and it may kind of be a non-answer. But I think trying to write in flexibility has not been an easy thing.
And then can I add on that just a little bit about the flexibility piece? Whatever we end up with for flexibility, if it's to be for staff approval, that criteria has to be very objective, or as objective as we can make it. Some of you have heard me say this before in previous presentations. If we have subjective or discretionary language, it's likely has to go through some type of board review, like a quasi-judicial board, like a board of adjustment. I don't think any of us want that. I don't think any of us on this call want that. So as we create regulations, anything that has staff review, we're trying to make it as objective as possible, which is difficult to do. And also it's not always, we understand developers want consistency, but they want flexibility. And that's hard to write and it's hard to write, put in language. I've heard that from many developers over the 25 plus years that I've been doing this stuff. So it's an ultimate goal we want to have. We want some objectivity. We want have staff to be able to prove as much as we can. But that language has to be objective or as objective as we can write it. We can't put things as disturb the roots as no impact or disturb minimum extent practical. That's something we can't have in our code. What is that? What's minimum extent practical to me may be something totally different to Allison. So that's I'd have to give into her though because she's the expert, not me. But does that make sense? It has to be objective criteria, not subjective criteria. So that's part that adds on to the difficulty of trying to write the code. And that's as I understand, or that's what we understand statute as well as case law on it.
Hey, Ron.
Yes.
Have you talked with Rebecca Roth about some of the things that they were not able to put in their code? They started to go down the road of writing flexibility into their revised code and just didn't have enough time to fully flesh out what the words really needed to say. But they have some really great ideas from their consultant. And if you've talked with her, that may be the first place to start.
Yeah, I've not had that specific conversation, Allison, but she did provide me with some, I need to go back and see what she gave me from their consultant to see if that's what you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah, I recommended it.
Yeah, she gave me more stuff than what their code actually incorporated. So
yeah, you probably have it then.
So we can go back through and look at that. I'm not sure exactly.
Okay.
Jim Gregory, question from Dave.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to address Dave's question, but what he's referring to is a site on which I've done the initial tree assessment. And it's a situation where there are a number of trees that my judgment should be taken out because they're unhealthy or severely damaged. So this question basically relates, well, how would the city view that in terms of not requiring mitigation for those trees? I presume that's, Dave, that was sort of your question.
I think, and let me just piggyback on that. I mean, I trust Jim. He seems to have the correct credentials to make good decisions as it relates to our environment. He is somebody who is not related to me and my company, but we are paying him and compensating him to do a function. But what I'm really needing from that is for the city to get that information and for Jim to be able to say, this is good, and Aaron to look at that and go, yeah, I mean, this is good, and then we can stop talking about it. And I think that seems very arbitrary. I mean, it seems, you hire a consultant that works for you, you want him to give you the answers you want him to say. But when Jim goes through and says, this is an invasive tree. And I go, but it's so pretty. He's like, no, you're thinking wrong. That, that mimosa is not your friend. But when he says, no, this tree is absolutely going to be okay. Save this. This tree is a problem. Get rid of it. I think what I'm trying to figure out is, can I just take that information and hand it to the city? And the city goes, okay, tree stuff, good, check, next problem. Because the trees are only one of my problems that I've got on a site like that. And the fewer things that are circling, the easier it is going to be for me to get through TRC and an approval. And I guess, I don't know how that becomes code, but I've got to believe that, at some point, the city wants the experts to, take the burden off of Aaron having to be called for every single tree issue, and allow a competent and responsible developer to take that information and use it for the benefit of the site overall.
Sure, we give that some thought at staff level as we move forward with the code. Current code, I think the current code, I could be totally mistaken. Just a dead tree, I don't think you have to mitigate. But if it's still a live tree, or just because it's unhealthy, I think the mitigation potentially would still apply. So what I'm hearing is consider something a little bit different than that. So we can think that out.
Yeah, that's exactly right. If it's a tree that is deemed to be unhealthy or severely damaged, I don't think it should count against the developer. It's a plus on the site to take it out and get it out of the way, if it might be a future hazard.
Okay. Tyler said he had to leave. He would like for us to talk about essential site improvements maybe the next time. That'd be good, because I think we do want to come up with this, how do we do essential site improvements? Or is it good like it is? So that's definitely something I think we want some feedback on, as well as some of the other topics we've had discussion on today. Anything else that anyone wants to bring up? Anything we've talked about or not talked about? I know none of you have seen a draft of the code. That's not been released yet, but we are still trying to work through some things that we've talked about today before we do get to that point.
Ron, this is Cameron again. I'm gonna log off after this, but I think just overall trying to get some consistency between the city and the county. I mean, the real estate market doesn't see county city lines. We don't really know lines in the sand, so to speak. By no means speaking for Connie here, but I know that we've had conversations about canopy and stuff like that. I think as you move from the city to the county or the county to the city, with some respect, it should try to look the same. I realize in some characteristics that's just not going to happen, but from an opportunity overall on some of these, is particularly when you look at the slides you got now with the 20 inches and specimen trees, trying to get some consistency there as far as between the both.
So let me ask you this question. If the county, if your group signed off on the 18 inches for the hardwoods, longleaf pines, pond cypress, and bald cypress, are you good if we incorporate that for significant trees?
Well, I've already signed off on them, so I don't really have much of a choice, do I?
I know, I hate to put you on the spot there, because that's
it is what it is. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, we were trying to address, I think the challenge I had with the counties is we had situations that unfortunately, I think created an issue and put politics behind it. And we had to deal with it in a very fast manner. I mean, that's I mean, and to deal with some of those situations sometimes, but I think what we have in the county, I haven't heard tremendous heartburn over it. I think the mitigation that we had, they do have different mitigation factors there. That's where we heard some of the heartburn. We were able to get those ratios a little bit more in line with a balanced approach. Your mitigation factors seem to be they're totally different first of all.
Sure, absolutely.
And I think that's what it comes down to. If I've got to remove a tree and I got to have mitigation, what is the cost? I mean, Dave would hit the nail on the head and he would say the same thing. What is the cost to our members if they have to remove a tree? And does it make sense?
Sure. Okay. Now we'll look at their mitigation. It's hard enough for me to know the current code plus the proposed code, much less try to also learn their code. So
Sure, no, and I get that.
still-
I mean, you know.
I'm still digging into it a little bit.
Yeah, real estate doesn't know county city lines, and you're the city of Wilmington. I get it. You have your own code. The county has their own code, and I'm not sitting here saying that they have to be basically, you know, side by side. But if we can have half an apple and half an orange instead of an apple and orange, that would be helpful.
Just, I want to get this on record since it is being recorded. I do think the code should be the same between the city and the county because I can't tell the difference from one side or the other. And I keep screwing up height and a few other things. So just, I know we're talking about trees, but they should look and feel really, really similar. And that's, I'll leave it at that. But
Hey, Dave, we have sidewalk. When you see sidewalk, you're in the city.
okay.
I will throw one more thing out there that we've proposed. Some of you may be aware of this, some of you may not be, that I hope will help with tree preservation. And some of the issues we talked about today is that we're proposing on eliminating the minimum parking standards. So not just telling a developer you have to put in 20 spaces for the fact that the building says you have to have 20 spaces. Let that builder decide what that minimum amount is. We are regulating maximum spaces. And in a lot of ways we have modified those what we're proposing. We have modified the number of spaces that we're allowing. Been a pretty detailed presentation to base on that, as well as to Planning Commission and City Council with some of our studies. So that will, I think, in the long run, help with how much property is being used for parking areas and that kind of thing. And hopefully that will result in more green space and open space.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Ron, I completely, oh, sorry, go ahead.
And Ron, your Walmart representation is a classic example of that.
Exactly.
I mean, they don't need, you could take 200 parking spaces out of that Walmart. But it goes back to my question earlier about the site plan. Is the site plan requirements dictating, you know, what's happening on the peripheries and the buffers and the trees and everything?
Sure, that's a good, valid question. And we had, for years, we've had more flexibility than the county has. I think they just incorporated some of that. So yes, Allison, I think you were making a point.
Yeah, I was going to say, I commend you for looking at the parking standards. That's a single thing that drives every site design. So if we have the ability to lessen the parking when it makes sense to do so, that will do more than anything we've talked about here today to save trees. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the support on that. So far, we think that's gone over surprisingly well. So, any other comments, questions, anything we need to talk about? The same group want to get together in a couple weeks. Does that sound feasible? Just so y'all know a timeline, we are under the gun to put out a draft of the entire code. I want to say all in one notebook. It won't literally be in one notebook, but by April 1st. March 31st is so we got to move quickly on this. There may be some things that we just agree to disagree on with the kind of like what you were talking about, Allison, where the county just had to put something in there and go. So our goal is we have to have something to City Council release on April 1st. So that's what we're pushing. That's what we're doing. That's just the first step, though, is there's still all the public vetting process and everything from there. So just because it's been given to council doesn't mean that it's up for adoption the next day. So Megan, can you just briefly kind of summarize where we kind of left this meeting today?
Yeah, so overall we have a couple big takeaways from this. One of them is looking at actually what's on the screen right now, looking back at the city and county standards when it comes to this, the 18 versus the 20 inches, and kind of possibly looking at how those could maybe be more in sync, or where we need to maybe draw a line between the city and the county. I also have noted to look into the Hilton Head standards, kind of maybe see what they are doing down there as well with their tree saving, after just so much conversation about that. Allison, I also have noted to look into the camera rules a little deeper when it comes to this overall. Also to have a discussion on the species type for credit the species tree types for credit. Looking at some of the flexibility, especially when it comes to mitigation standards, specifically when it comes to the dead and dying. Sorry, I'm skimming notes. Also looking at parking islands and what we can do with that when it comes to curbing versus no curbing and stormwater infiltration options. And then also looking into maybe the flexibility when it comes to a certified arborist and how we might be able to utilize that as well moving forward, if it is something that we can either give credit for or possibly work into our standards of some way to give a little flexibility, but also creating a little more objective language in that. So that'll be probably an interesting thing to tackle. But that's my overall pieces. And then just the final comment on this is trying to find consistency between the city and county code, but also understanding that they will still be different in places. Did I?
Thanks for that
Did
summary.
everybody's notes and comments? Did I miss anything?
This is recorded, so if we miss it, we can go back and listen to it. We probably will put this on our website, the dedicated webpage for the land development code. So anybody can have access. We do that. Well, when that happens, we'll send a link out to everyone so you can have it. Anything else?
Yeah, could you also send us the PowerPoint?
Yes, sir. I'll be glad to. Be glad to. And that it'll be linked within the presentation as well, but I'll be glad to send it out.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks,
Anything
Ron.
else?
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys. I really enjoyed the conversation. It's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.